Today is July 4th, 2017. And I don't know if you can hear the birds. I am in a place called Grand Island, Nebraska. And it is just after 5 o'clock in the morning, so about 05:30. And I have a load of beer that I'm trying to deliver to a place that's supposed to receive between 05 and 0900. But the place isn't open, so it is the holiday. It is the 4th of July, so maybe they're not going to open today. Maybe I came for no reason, but at any rate, that gives me time to talk. So let me get out of the breeze. There's a light breeze going on here. And of course, as I can hear a chorus of birds and other things that chirp. And it's beautiful. So I am out of the elements right now and wanted to just say how grateful I am to live in the United States as we celebrate Independence Day. I had a conversation with a friend the other day that really drives home to me how important it is to dwell on the blessings you have from living in the United States. Too many black people are filled with such anger against the past that they cannot appreciate the present. I say they're holding grudges against white ghosts, angry because of what white people did in the past. Those white people are dead and gone, and they didn't do it to you. Now, I'm not saying that what some whites did in the past wasn't atrocious, egregious, racist, obviously. But I know that not all white people participated in that egregious behavior. Until blacks stop putting race above righteousness, until they stop putting race above reason, many are going to continue to remain angry at the United States and thus not appreciate the real reason we're celebrating the 4th of July. It is not about barbecue and firecrackers. It is about the fact that this country said, listen, we want independence. We don't want to be taxed without representation. We don't want to be bullied by a government. Well, under the Obama administration, we certainly were bullied by a government. When we said no to same-sex marriage, he said yes anyway. When we said, no, we don't want the health care reform that you're talking about, he put it upon us anyway. When we said, no, we don't want you to open the borders wider for people to come in illegally, he did it anyway. When we said, no, we don't want you to bring in Islamic refugees, it is going to happen anyway. When we said, no, we don't want you to make a deal over nuclear arms with Iran. We don't trust them. He did it anyway. And even before him, Bush did some things too we didn't like, and he did it anyway. So we have been slowly advancing towards a government that does what it wants to do despite what its citizens say. But under the last administration, it was more apparent to me than at any other time in my brief lifetime. But so we've gotten away from the very reason this country was set up, to not find ourselves bullied by a governmental system. The point I'm making today is simply that this country, despite the things that it did in the past, is still a great place to live. And you can either focus on the atrocities of America's history, or you can appreciate the opportunities of America's today. America's present. I can't think of another country in which I'd like to live, except perhaps maybe Canada. Now, I did want to live in France. I did want to live in Paris once. I love French. I'm constantly trying to teach myself how to understand it because that's a difficulty for me. But now that Islamic terrorists are blowing up Paris every other day, it seems. That's not a place I want to go to anymore. People used to run to the United States just as saints symbolically ran to heaven for haven, for refuge. Now, because we became so ridiculous in our generosity, we let in people we should not have let in. Now that's the case, we are about to be no different than Paris. In fact, there was 911, which I'm sure those guys didn't pull off by themselves, but they were involved. And they were Muslim. There was the beheadings in Oklahoma City by the black guy who was Islam. See, that's what threw us off with Obama. Okay, I'm about to go off in another direction. I didn't mean to go here. Black people, you all are partly responsible for what is happening in the United States today. Let me tell you why. You have been fooled. You have been bamboozled. You have been hoodwinked. Anybody who knows black history knows those are words I'm paraphrasing. I'm borrowing from Malcolm X. Here's the point. Islam in 1923, I think it was defeated temporarily in its quest to take over the world. But it didn't stop. It didn't give up. It said, okay, we're going to infiltrate the West and take it over anyway. How can we do it? Well, with the West, they won't let us in to blow up things, so we can't do it that way. That was the case with us. But we can do it in other ways. You can hear them thinking. There are other forms of jihad other than strapping a bomb to yourself or going through and beheading people and stabbing people. There is ideological jihad. You fight philosophically. You fight politically. You get into the political system of the people you want to take down. Now, how do you do that as a Muslim? Well, get the oppressed people in that community on your side. And that's going to be easy to do. Why? Because they don't like white people anyway, because of the history between whites and blacks in the United States. Tell them that becoming a Muslim is a good way to reclaim their black African identity, because guess what? Their ancestors were Muslim. Here's the thing with that. All of you blacks who are so proud to claim Muslim identity because you think that means you're down, you're African, you're black, you're respecting your ancestors, research how your ancestors became Muslim, if indeed they were. Because many in Africa weren't. Many were Christian. But research how Islam was spread to your ancestors. The same way it's being spread today. Convert or move. Convert or be killed. And guess how many Africans were made slaves by Muslims? The Muslim slave trade was going on long before the Europeans got in on it. So if you think that blacks are Christian because they were oppressed by slave masters who claimed to be Christian, blacks became Muslim because they were oppressed by slave masters who were Muslim. That's nothing of which to be proud. But because you thought that would be a good way to get back at the white man, you embraced Islam, but you needed it packaged just for you. So here comes Elijah Muhammad. Not the Muhammad that real Islam worships, but Elijah Muhammad, a black man. I think he was from Detroit. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But he began the Nation of Islam, which took young black men, cleaned them up, took them off the streets, put them in a suit and tie, made them respectful, carried themselves well at a time when they were routinely being called boys by the dominant culture. Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, these guys were visible representatives of this group. And we liked them because they didn't act afraid of the white man. And they came along at a time when we were still being heavily oppressed, segregated, all of that. And here is Malcolm at the time, and then later Farrakhan. But here are these guys who are eloquent, Oh my goodness, did they master the language. We're impressed by that, Black people. For some reason, we're impressed by people who can work the tongue. That's both good and bad, because the person can say a lot of things that sound good but mean little. At any rate, we were impressed by Louis Farrakhan. We were impressed by Malcolm X. Even though Malcolm later converted from Nation of Islam to Islam, and that Nation of Islam didn't like that. He became an apostate to them, really. You don't leave them. And so apparently it's wrong to leave one type of Muslim and become another type of Muslim. Those are two different things, too. The real Muslims don't recognize the Nation of Islam anyway. They're not following the same person. There's Muhammad and there's Elijah Muhammad. Those are two different things. And to a real Muslim, Muhammad has the status of a god anyway. But my point is this. Blacks were disarmed because of Elijah Muhammad, because of Malcolm X, because of Louis Farrakhan. We were not afraid of Islam. We thought it was cool. We thought it was hip, a hip alternative to Christianity. So we embraced it. Then we get Cassius Clay, who becomes Muhammad Ali. Oh, the greatest fighter. There again, lingual agility. Working that tongue. Muhammad could do it. Ali could do it. We were impressed by that. Not only that, he was a pretty man. Yes, he was. And not only that, he was boastful. He was audacious. And he was, most of all, good in the ring. Beautiful to watch. Then here comes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Another Muslim name. Oh, we love Kareem. He was a good basketball player. Later, we get other folks like Ahmad Rashad and our beautiful, beloved Felicia Rashad. I don't think she ever converted to Islam. She just married Ahmad. But here are names, again, that are Muslim, and we're not bothered by that as Black people. We don't see that as a cause for concern. In fact, when we hear that another Black person has a Muslim name, for some reason we think that means he or she is down. Boy, he's really Black. He's with it. So when a man came along who wanted to be president and had a Muslim name, Black people were not alarmed by that. We had been conditioned not to be. Now, who knew that about us? The same ones who have been plotting since the 1920s to get back into the swing of spreading their caliphate. They knew that Blacks would not find Barack Hussein a threat, but that they would embrace him. He's got a real Black name. He's got to be down. So while they saw a down brother, what the Muslims, I believe, hoped Blacks did not see is a Muslim, a real Muslim, which I am convinced that is what Obama is. Otherwise, he'd have been killed if he had indeed been raised Muslim in Indonesia, as records show, was still a Muslim on his college transcript, and then supposedly converted to Jeremiah Wright's Christian church. He wouldn't be alive as a representative, I don't believe. Conversion is not tolerated in Islam. And if it is, you got to be watching over your shoulder the whole time. If you are a public servant, if you are a high-profile individual, I cannot see them allowing Obama to live after he proclaimed that he was of Jesus Christ. We know about that thing, I think it's called taqiyya, in which you are able to lie to the infidel if it furthers the cause of Islam. So Obama can say, yeah, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. Yeah, because that's what we needed to hear. That's what he needed to say to us, the infidel. But what do his actions show? When he was in political office, out of his mouth came all of this praise over and over again for Islam. Out of his mouth, before he became president, are recorded speeches of him condemning Christianity, the Bible. And the decisions that he made in office showed that he was looking out for the interests of Muslims, not Christians. It didn't matter what he said about Jesus Christ being his Lord and Savior. His face didn't even look right when he said that. You can tell when a person's not sincere. So what I'm trying to say is Blacks were used by the real Islamic forces to approve of someone's getting into presidential office who would further the goals and the aims of the Islamic movement. Whites, at the same time, had also been disarmed for the same reasons. They loved Muhammad Ali too. They loved Kareem Abdul-Jabbar also. And they had been taught to be silent about their feelings for blacks. The whites who were of my generation received the same liberal hogwash education I got in public schools. The education that made us believe that all white people in the past were evil racists and slaveholders who deserved condemnation. That same educational system made us believe that in American history, all blacks were saints in chains who simply needed freedom in order to soar and be all that they could be. Whites had been indoctrinated to believe that the worst thing they could be called was racist. Thus, the narrative turned Martin Luther King into a saint, and whites bought that. And if they didn't buy it, they knew they weren't supposed to say that. They had been taught to be silent about their real feelings. Political correctness began a long time ago, and that was part of it, telling whites that they could not say what they really felt. So when Obama came along, whites who said, look, I don't approve of this man, or who wanted to say that. I don't approve of him because from what I can tell of his background, he is a socialist in his thinking. He is a revolutionary, an anti-American revolutionary. I don't want him as president. But no, they couldn't say that because somebody had told them they weren't supposed to talk about the people whose people were oppressed. Now, I think that many whites have awakened from that spell. Now they are no longer under the hypnosis of being quiet. But it's too late. When they should have spoken up, many were quiet. And so Barack Obama was able to ease right on in there the way the powers that be wanted him to. And I don't know what goes on behind the scene. I don't know what happens at the upper levels of government or lower levels for that matter, honestly. I'm only giving my opinion as a citizen, as a resident of the United States. And it seems to me that more than just the Muslims were in on Barack Obama getting into office, but he got in, and the residents of this country allowed it without protest. If there was ever a time we should have protested the election of a president, the inauguration of a president, it should have been when Barack Obama went into office, not when Donald Trump went in. People ask me, aren't you upset about Trump? No. Aren't you upset about Obama? How are you upset about Donald Trump, but you weren't upset about Obama? What is wrong with people? Don't you realize which of those is more dangerous to the American fabric? Now, I am not a Trump fan, and I am not an anti-Trump person. After Obama, I was through. You couldn't do worse than putting a Muslim in charge of a Judeo-Christian nation. So anything that came after that, we asked for it. We deserve it. I do not believe Trump is the worst thing to happen. No. But I just don't know him. I know he's a smart businessman, I know he's a billionaire, which makes him one of the smartest people you and I will ever know. It's easy to poke at him and make fun of him and talk about him. But black people, I know for a fact you all worshipped Donald Trump when all he represented to you was money, because you worship money. And when I say black people, I actually have a particular type of black in mind. I don't think black people are all the same. We come from different tribes. But there are particular groups of African descendants in this country that worship money. But as soon as somebody told them they were supposed to hate him because he had Republican tied to his name, oh, they hated this man that they formerly worshipped for the Benjamins. Blacks need to realize that people have been using them for a long time. When they stopped using you and me and our people for our manual labor in slavery, they began using us mentally and emotionally. And we continue to let them do so today until we wake up and stop letting people tell us how we are going to vote, for instance. The black vote. You know what that means? You're so stupid. You can't decide how to vote individually. You can only vote the way your group tells you to vote, or recommends you vote, or suggests you vote. That's what the black vote means. That means you can't think for yourself. Until you become an African American who can think for herself or himself and say, I don't care what the group at large believes. This is what I see. This is what I feel. This is what I think, and this is what I'll do. Then you're still going to be enslaved. Until you can get to that point, you will never be free. You will never have your Independence Day.